It is a great day to be alive, and I am so thankful for God, Jesus Christ, who lives in us. Today's video is titled S&P 500 to 667, What Happened on September 15th? Before we get started, I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing that I'm sharing is financial advice. I'm simply sharing dreams, visions, and interpretations that I feel God has given me as it relates to crypto. Now, let's get into the video. Starters, I want to get into this diagram that I put together here. And this diagram, as you can see here, has 4 columns. The first column has to do with a dream that I had December 28th. I've talked about this dream, and it has something to do with the housing market. Something was wrong with the housing market. The second column here is the Eiffel Tower dream that I shared. The third column is the dream that I had that contained the number 667, the same numbers that I saw in the Eiffel Tower dream. And then this final column is not a dream, it's just an event about a topic, the Lehman Brothers, that God led me to prior to our September 15th date. When I had this Eiffel Tower dream, there was no derived date. All it was me seeing a crash taking place and also understanding something about this number 667. Once I saw this peak hit at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and then I saw the number 667. And from there, a large candle began to fall. Over time, God has shown me how each of these dreams line up with this Eiffel Tower dream, how they connect. So for starters, looking at the first column, this dream about my student and his mom and understanding something was wrong with the housing market, on this day, December 28th, was the day that Gustavo Eiffel died. Okay? He is the individual that built the Eiffel Tower. He died on December 28th. I had this dream on December 28th. That is me connecting this particular dream to the Eiffel Tower. Again, it has something to do with the housing market. Something was wrong with the housing market. This next dream has 2 components that connects it to the Eiffel Tower, but I want to stick with the one that sticks out the most, and that is that in this dream, I saw several clear bins. Each clear bin had yellow toys. The yellow toys were piled to the top, and on top of each pile, I saw the number 667. I saw this number on each pile of yellow toys, 667. Well, that number, without a dollar sign, it was just 667. That number I also saw in the Eiffel Tower dream. In the Eiffel Tower dream, there was a dollar sign, and it was green. So that is how this dream connects to the Eiffel Tower, because of the number. So after having this dream, and after seeing these colors, I understood that God was allowing me to get a date. And that date, of course, was September the 15th. And that is what I have here, a derived date of September the 15th. After getting this date of September the 15th, God prompted me to look into the Lehman Brothers, something that I had never thought to do. But there I was looking into Lehman Brothers, and to my surprise, September 15th popped up again. Lehman Brothers has to do with a mortgage crisis, one that sparked a global market crash, a global crash. So I have this one dealing with mortgage and a crash, and I have September 15th. Well, once I began to think about mortgage, housing, that prompted me to go back to my first dream when I knew something was wrong with the housing market. And to my surprise, the student and his mother, I never thought to look at the son, simply because the son's not old enough to buy a house when it comes down to housing market. So I stuck with the mom's birthday. But to my surprise, all this long time, from December 28th up until a week before September 15th this year, I just realized that I had the date of September 15th all along. Several videos where I shared this dream about the mom, April the 13th, anything pertaining to April the 13th. Well, here we are, right here, April 13th is where I got that date from this dream. And on April the 13th, Mantra crash. You guys may remember hearing talking about mantra and the mantra crash. Well, that date came from this dream. This dream having something to do about the housing market. So here we are, April 13th, we have that crash. April the 5th, September 15th, the derived date that I had for all this long time, didn't even recognize it until after I came across the Lehman Brothers. And I know that's why God led me there, because he wanted me to go back and, for that housing crisis, to jog my memory, to think about the housing market crash and to go back to this particular dream. And when I did, I see, okay, God, I've had this date of September 15th all along. So this date of September 15th goes with the Lehman Brothers. Okay. And on this day, 2008, there was a major crash, global crash, simply because of what happened with the Lehman Brothers. If you also notice, I have anniversaries. There are anniversaries within every column because there is an anniversary that takes place. Here is pretty simple. September 15th, gone this year, the anniversary of what happened with the Lehman Brothers. That's a given. So we got that. And then moving over here, I have anniversary because August 6th was a date that stood out last year to me because of the Japan market crash. That date, August 6th, was given to me in this dream about Baltimore, Ohio. Well, a year later, 2025, I had the yellow toy stream. Not about anything to do with Baltimore, Ohio, nothing like that, but it had to do with the crash, this crash that I saw in this dream. So this dream, this date of August 6th is still connecting me to some type of crash. In this case, it's directing me back to the Eiffel Tower dream because of the number 667. So on the anniversary of August 6th, I had the yellow toy stream. Okay, so that is an anniversary. And as we take a look at the Eiffel Tower column, the anniversary here would be this year, I began to do my research. God is dropping my spirit, Dotcom bubble. What does the Dotcom bubble have anything to do with the Eiffel Tower? I began to do my research, and the day that I did my research was March the 10th. This year, March the 10th, 2025. And as I did my research, I began to look and read, and I'm like, wait a minute. The dot-com bubble, when this thing dropped and hit its lowest, it was on March the 10th, 2008. Excuse me, March the 10th, 2009. So today is an anniversary. I'm doing research on the anniversary of the dot-com bubble, when it hit its lowest point. And how does the dot-com bubble connect to the Eiffel Tower? Well, the S&P 500 hit 667. That was its lowest in 2009. So that was the anniversary there. Another anniversary is just this year, September 18th, gone. That would mark a year since I had this Eiffel Tower dream. So that is what all the anniversary labels are about. There are anniversaries for each column. Each of these dreams here lines up with the Eiffel Tower because, again, he built the Eiffel Tower, and here the number 667. So as we inch closer into looking at this September 15th date, another thing that I want to point out is that in this dream, my Eiffel Tower dream, I saw three numbers, $667. For me, this SPY, I knew something about the SPY S&P 500. This had to be the S&P ETF because the S&P ETF only has 3 digits. However, God dropping in my spirit to look at the dot-com bubble, that one is about the S&P main, the larger one, the one that encompasses a lot of different stocks. Based on what happened on September 15th, and based on how God directed me to do my research, knowing nothing about the dot-com bubble, knowing nothing about how it went down, and then to find out that it went from peak to low of 667, that to me was God steering me in that direction. So now I have to ask myself the question, God, on September 15th, this date that was derived from this yellow toy stream that connects perfectly with the numbers, that connects perfectly with the dot-com bubble numbers, are you showing me S&P 500 main or S&P 500 ETF? Which one are you showing me? And I asked that question because of what we saw on September the 15th. So now I have to take a step back and I have to say, okay, God, I need clarity on which is which. Before I get into the specifics about September 15th, I want to just bring out the topics based on all of this, based on everything that God has been showing me with this diagram, everything that I put together. September 15th was all about housing or mortgage. It was about the Fed, and then in the end, the dot-com bubble. So here we are, September 15th, and there had been an ongoing case with Lisa Cook. We know that she's a part of the Fed. She's on the Fed board, and Trump was looking to get her fired because of mortgage fraud. Well, on September 15th, there was no issues found with her, and therefore she was able to move forward and be a part of the interest rate meeting that will take place with the Fed that took place on September the 16th. So on September 15th, all this about this mortgage fraud, mortgage, was taken care of, was put to rest for the most part, and she was able to participate in the Fed's meeting. The key word here for me is mortgage and Fed. Focusing on the Fed, on September 15th, we see that Trump put out a post on Truth Social, and in his post, he was saying that the Feds need to cut rates bigger than he had in mind. Bigger rates. And this was strange for me. Housing will soar. Now, we know that the jobs report came out a few days prior to September 15th, and it was a jobs report that made everybody uneasy. But here in this message here, he's saying that if you cut interest rates, then housing will soar. So two things on the same day that has to do with mortgage and housing. It's this True Social post that talks about cutting rates and housing will soar. And this case here that's over had to do with mortgage fraud. Cutting rates bigger will cause the housing markets to soar. This reminded me of the Lehman Brothers, but in the opposite took place. So it was because of the dot-com bubble that the Lehman Brothers situation took place. Why? Because after this bubble had burst, the Feds did a response to this by cutting the rates very big. They did a very big rate cut. As a result, that set the stage for the Lehman Brothers mortgage crisis. So when I looked at Trump's True Social post and saw that he wanted to cut rates very, very big, and then in the end he said housing will soar, it reminded me of what the Feds did during the dot-com bubble time and how, as a result, that caused the Lehman Brothers mortgage crisis. And in the end, there was a global collapse. So here we are looking at the dot-com bubble. The information that we see here, we see that it peaked out at 1552, and it hit its low at 667. And again, for the dot-com bubble, you're looking at the S&P, the one that is the benchmark for the U.S. stock market. So this is the main one. So think back, September 15th, what did we see? What I came across was this particular post on X, and it says that the S&P closes above 6,600 for the first time ever. Again, this is the dot-com bubble one, the one that hit a low of 667. Okay. And so for the first time ever, it's closed above 6,600. Well, at this point, I decided to go and take a look at the chart. And by this time, I saw the X post late. But by the time I got to the chart, take a look at it, I saw that majority of the day, there was a lot of bouncing going on. A lot of bouncing going on right here in this area, which was or just above 6,670. 667. And so I began to think back again on the dot-com bubble. Yes, is this S&P 500 main for this dream of the Eiffel Tower, or is this S&P 500 ETF? Now, backing up a few days to September the 12th, I was checking on the S&P 500 ETF and seeing how close we were to getting to that 667 number, because again, in the dream, I only saw 3 digits. I saw 6, 6, and 7. Well, as I'm checking in on this on September the 12th, I looked over and this number just caught my eye. 667. That is the total assets. And I saw it. I was like, okay, must be close. For me, I feel like these were God's way of confirming this whole 667 and what's about to take place once the S&P 500 reaches this. For me, it's a matter of, God, I need you to confirm to me, which is it? Am I looking for the ETF one to hit 667, or am I looking for the main to hit 6,670, which it did? Am I looking for both? Or are you showing me these numbers just in passing? Like here, I'm seeing 667. So based on September the 15th, if it's ES, I don't know, I keep wanting to say ES. If it's S&P 500 main, then we've already seen that. We've already seen it hit 667 right there. Okay. But if it's both or if it's the other, we're just shy of that. But my focus is on the date of September 15th. Which one hit this number on September the 15th? Another thing that I want to question God about and ask him about is this. Why is it that in this dream I saw a dollar sign in front of 667? And in this dream, it was just a regular number. Just a regular number. Are you telling me that I need to look for two different numbers when it comes down to the S&P 500? Basically, am I looking for both to hit? Are you showing me one for one and one for the other one? In other words, does this one, because you showed me dot-com bubble, does this one connect to the dot-com bubble, which would be what we saw on September the 15th, main? And does this one connect to the ETF? Those are just questions. All I know is I have to start with what God has given me, and that is at September 15th date. I had another YouTuber, a brother-in-law, reach out to me on September the 15th, asking me a question. What do I think will cause this crash to take place? And I shared in this video here, I talked about the Lehman Brothers and how that had to do with, of course, the mortgage crisis, and how that ties to my dream in December. And so how I felt that God was saying it has something to do with the housing market, probably, because he led me to the dot-com bubble. I began to think about AI. And so in this video, I talked about the Lehman Brothers, how God led me there. I talked about AI, and I also talked about a few stocks, AI stocks that I think may play a role in this coming crash. So is it something like Lehman Brothers with the mortgage crisis that's going to cause a global collapse? Is it something to do with AI, or is it a combination of both? Well, again, sticking to the date of September 15th, as I'm considering both AI, dot-com bubble. What stood out the most to me on the 15th, here, this one, these are several different articles, but this one was on the 15th. I saw this article that says China says Nvidia violated anti-monopoly laws, significantly escalating trade tensions with U.S. Then it goes on to talk about how the Nvidia, in this article, the Nvidia CEO was disappointed after reports of China banned. So there's something going on with Nvidia when it comes down to, I guess, it's chips, something that's going on with China. I don't know all the details about it, but this stuck out to me. Again, going into this date with AI in mind, comparing it to the dot-com bubble back in 2009. This article talks about tech stocks and how the levels have went up, but still remains below the dot-com bubble surge. So I thought that seeing the dot-com bubble mentioned in this article was significant to the fact, again, this is September the 15th. And then this article has to do with the S&P 500, how it's rising based on AI momentum and the Fed's clarity, their decisions. And with this in mind, what happens if the Fed decision goes wrong? What happens when the momentum in AI goes down, as the S&P has been rising all along because of what's happening with AI? Well, that could cause a crash. And let's not forget, if there's anything going on with the housing market, mortgage crisis, that would just add insult to injury. So all in all, everything that I put together here, like I said, in that video I saw on September 15th, specifically in those articles, they're talking about Nvidia. So I'm keeping an eye on Nvidia. I'm keeping an eye on what's being said about AI, as well as the housing market. And I do want to say that this date here from this housing market dream, April the 13th, I was looking more for a housing market crash during that time, but instead we ended up getting this mantra coin that crashed on that day. However, a few days after that, I came across some articles. I think the first instance where I shared this date was in February of this year, and I came across 2 articles that was marked with a future date that specifically talked about the date of April the 13th. Here are those articles right here. So I don't think that it's a coincidence that God gave me this April 13th date in this dream. And then at the same time, he gave me the date of September 15th, which September 15th is a historic date because of the Lehman Brothers. So housing market, something was wrong with it. Lehman Brothers. And then this date this year in these articles talking about the housing market, the best time to buy or the best time to sell. I'm keeping an eye out on S&P ETF, waiting for that 667 because of God just giving me 2 dreams with that number in it. Is that indicating 2 instances? That is something that I'm praying about there. And I'm keeping my eye on what's going on with the Feds because I think it's something to do with their decision to cut rates. If they're going to continue to cut rates, there's something there because all of this that took place on the 15th with Lisa Cook dealing with mortgage fraud, the post that Trump put on True Social about cutting rates, make big cuts so that the housing market will soar or housing will soar. Those little things stood out to me on September the 15th. And so I'm taking all of that, as I've shared already, and praying over it all. But if what God is showing me was intended for September 15th date, which is specifically for what we saw with S&P 500 Main, then we've hit that 667, and this crash is going to be coming very soon because that 667 has already been hit. But if God's waiting for them both to hit, then we're not that far from that, looking at the S&P 500 ETF. And something that I didn't know, but I'm praying about and looking into, I don't know a whole lot when it comes down to the narrative behind these stocks. And so someone shared yesterday, they said we did it. The S&P-X, which is theoretical benchmark, a numerical value that reflects the S&P 500 SPY performance, just passed 6,670. The S&P-X trades 10 times higher than SPY. So basically he's saying that, for me, in my mind, that the S&P main, this SPX is like a large umbrella where all of these other stocks perform under it. And then that gives you a value or a price, if I'm saying that right. I can see it in my mind, but I'm probably not saying it right. But the ETF is like a little feature to that. Or in other words, main trades 10 times as much in value than the ETF one, if that makes sense at all. Anyway, so basically, it's not always on point. I looked up some of this. It's not always the fact that today the S&P 500 main traded 10 times more than the S&P 500 ETF. The idea behind it is what he's saying here, and this is totally true. But it's not looking at the numbers and the actuality. Is you go back and do the math and multiply where the S&P 500 ETF is now, multiply that by 10. It's going to get you very close to what the S&P main is on that day. But I love that he shared this. This is something that I did not know. I'm coming across a lot of things. I'm being taught a lot of things. So thank you for sharing this post. And just out of curiosity, I want to do the math really quick and see what it comes out to be. So looking at S&P 500 main, it closed at 6,719. Divide that by 10 because it's supposed to be 10 times higher than SPY. Divide that by 10 and you get 671. Well, the S&P ETF closed at 663. So the difference there is about $8 or $9. So that's something that I'm keeping in mind too, just the relationship between these two, how they connect. Again, all this stuff is new to me. I'm learning as you guys are providing the information. So I cannot thank you guys enough for your prayers, for your support, for sharing the videos, for subscribing, for all of your comments, encouraging words, even those that comments that come to kind of make you think. They're not being hurtful or not saying anything bad, but it's just things that they share that makes you think like, I didn't think about it that way. I didn't know that. So I'm grateful for everybody. I'm grateful for everything. And so we'll see what next week holds as we continue to keep an eye on Little Spy. I'm calling it Little Spy, as it approaches 667. But if September 15th, this date that I feel God had given me, what transpired was S&P 500 main. It reached that number of 667. But again, in my Eiffel Tower dream, I saw 3 digits and not 4 digits. So that's something that I'm taking to the Lord. But on the flip side, he did send me to the .com bubble, which had to do with the S&P main. So a lot of stuff, a lot of prayers. Let's just see what happens on next week. Again, right after that happened in the dream, I saw the drop. I saw a crash. So let's continue to pray about it. Continue to pray about everything that I have presented here. If God gives you anything, please feel free to comment, email, and share. I would love to hear that. That's all that I have for this video. Until the next one, God bless.